Okay, you're all set.
Already good. Okay, good. Hey, welcome to What's All the Hype. I love this part of the program. It's my introduction, and I get to tell a joke, which I think Hallie doesn't appreciate my dad jokes, but I like them. So here's my dad joke. The question is, do the islands in Hawaii allow for loud laughing? Anyone know? Or is it just a low ha? That's right. I'm here all week. So if you need more dad jokes, just email me and I'll send you a bunch.
I did, just so you know, I did a legit LOL. I just was muted.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's I get these from like two guys on a dock or something on I don't know, and they're hilarious. They're it's dry sense of humor and they're funny and they appear well in any company. So right, good stuff. So today we are going to be talking about triple net and single tenant net lease investments, what they are, what they mean, how they differ from, let's say, multifamily. A little bit. We talk a lot about multifamily on my program, but on this particular day, we're not talking about that. And the catalyst for this today is a property that we're looking into for a client of ours to purchase, and the people that are going to be leasing them, their tenant is they're called the Quick Quack Car Wash, and it's a company that's nationwide. They've got about 75 locations, and I was doing the lease analysis and so forth for my client to make an offer to purchase the real estate portion of this. And I thought it'd be a really good subject matter to talk about. And so does anyone, just kind of raise a hands or, is anyone familiar with triple net leases or single tenant net leases?
I don't know. It's probably not the same thing, but years ago, I used to work for investors who did equipment leasing. So it wasn't necessarily buying real estate. I think there were a few things, but it was buying other things. And I don't know if it's anything connected with that.
No, it's not, but I appreciate the feedback. Okay, cool. So we talk about, this is my favorite type of investment product. And the reason why is that in a simple look at it, as the landlord, you're pretty much just paying for the mortgage. And that's the only cost you really have when you have a single tenant net lease or a triple net lease in your properties. And everything is a pass through to the tenant. So all the costs you have, in fact, just got done negotiating another lease right now. Everything that comes up in cost goes to the tenant. And so when you're looking at it and you're saying, I can put this together as an investment, the only thing you have to worry about is the financing. So the more money you put down, the bigger your net check is going to be when you get your tenant in the location. In certain circumstances, it can be different tenants in different, like a strip center, that kind of thing. But we're going to talk about Quick Quack Car Wash today. And that's just one location, a single tenant, net lease, and what it means to have an investment like that. So let me pull up, if I can share the screen here. I'm going to share. Okay, can everyone see that? So this is an offering memorandum from a commercial broker about a piece of land that my client wants to purchase. As you can see in the upper left-hand corner, in this entire center, my client's going to purchase the land, right? His tenant has already been picked, and it's going to be the Quick Quack Car Wash. So when he purchases this land, the car wash has already signed a lease. And they're going to be the only people leasing this land. So the other ones that you see, the other pieces of land that you see, could be purchased by the same person, my client, which won't happen because this piece of land's about $3 or $4 million, right? But you could purchase the whole center And each one of these particular pieces of land would be leased out to one tenant, single tenant, right? Does that make sense? Single tenant. So what does that mean? Well, that means that I can't even say this very well, Quick Quack Car Wash is going to be the tenant. And in this particular case, the way the lease is designed is that the tenant is going to be responsible for the construction of the building. They're going to be in charge of and pay for all of the utilities. They're going to pay for the property tax. They're going to pay for the expenses. And they're also going to pay rent, the base rent. And they're also going to pay the landlord a check for what they call common area maintenance. So all this money that you're getting is after they're already paying all the expenses in the lease as a tenant. So some tenants, like if you get a tenant, let's say in your in a house or in a multifamily, right? They pay you rent, and sometimes you got to pay for electricity and the water. That's not the case here. They pay for everything, plus the center with all the other locations here will share in some maintenance together, parking, gardener, some other utility possibly, and there'll be a price to that. And the lease that we're negotiating for, or has been negotiated for the car wash, they pay their base rent to the landlord, and they also pay a $3,000 a month common area maintenance fee to the landlord, so that the landlord can participate in the center's maintenance costs. So at the end of the day, the only costs that the landlord actually has is the mortgage and how they finance or refinance that money to increase their cash flow. It's a great product. You know, obviously as a tenant investment, it's a great way to get into the game. Now, mind you, they've got to come up with $3 or $4 million to purchase it. So let's take a look at the quick overview of the tenant and this offering memorandum. You can see that when it was developed, you know, right, for car wash and 160 locations. I misspoke. I thought it was 70 between Arizona, California, and Colorado. So we know that it's a really strong tenant that's already signed and put a non-refundable deposit down on the land itself, which has not been developed yet, right? And as you can tell, the center has got some other people coming into the center, including what they call an anchor tenant, which will be Sprouts, but there'll also be a single tenant net lease for Sprouts as well. All these different tenants will have the same type of lease. If you look down here, this is kind of the bullet points for the lease. So you get a tenant, they're going to be the car wash. This is kind of what they're doing. And basically they're leasing the land from you. Now, let's say, for example, they build this car wash and everything's going well, but all of a sudden things aren't going well. They don't take their car wash with them. They may take some of the items and fixtures from there, depending on how the lease is written, if they can't make money. But at the end of the day, this is the first tenant, and sometimes you have to get another car wash to come in and lease it from you. But they're taking care of all the expenses and all the money to lease from you, and you have no other expenses. It's a fantastic opportunity for an investment to get some returns. Now take a look at this. If you go down here and you see it's a 20-year lease from the commencement date, and they can renew 4 more times for 5 years each. So another 20 years at the end of the first 20 years. And this is the kind of rent that we're talking about. $150,000, $165,000. So the escalation of rent is already built into your lease. This is what you're making per year. You just have one tenant that leases from you and takes care of all of the expenses. except for the financing. As you see here, part of this analysis, the tenant will maintain its own parcel. Tenant agrees to pay the landlord an annual contribution of $3,000 per year, which will be increased 3% annually. So that's a $3,000 per year that they pay for the shopping center and the maintenance fees that the landlord would incur that they already pay. They're going to pay all the taxes, the assessments. They pay all the utilities, right? Repairs and maintenance. Landlord has no duty to repair, maintain the structure, right? So it's a kind of, of course, the leases are written and they're unique. So you can write these, what they call triple net leases in any way you'd like, but most of them have a lot of the same bones to them. But it's a great investment product because all you have to do is come up with the money to buy the land and finance it and make sure you got the right person in place and you collect a check. Not all people, go ahead.
I just had a quick question. Are you going to explain the difference between single tenant lease and triple net lease?
Well, they're one and the same.
Okay, so why does someone say one and the other?
Because they like to make it complicated and confuse people, don't know what they're doing.
Oh, thanks for telling me the truth, because sometimes people dance around it. So cool.
Yeah. I mean, a triple net lease, I mean, you can, we always kid around, but a single tenant net lease and a triple net lease can be the same thing.
Okay.
And it's just the way you do it. Now, you can have spaces in a shopping center like retail, and each one of those people has a net lease in there, right? And depending on which way you do it, a single tenant net lease usually incorporates a lot of the cost. Like in the car wash, for example, they're building everything, right? Some places they do a triple net and it's already built for them. So they don't necessarily come in with it not built. Sometimes it's like a second generation, just depends on how it works. In this particular case, it's land. So the investor is just buying the land and the tenant's agreeing to build their structure, build to suit. Locally, we have seen this a lot. In Seal Beach, they had Hoff's Hut that came in and did a ground lease and basically said, hey, here you go. This is what we're going to do. We're going to build our restaurant to suit on your land and we're just going to lease. So there's a lot of interesting math to all of this, right? And I don't want to really get into that too much. What I want to get into is why it's, I mean, as you can kind of see the revenues and cash flow, and this is what we do in commercial, right? This is the kind of thing that we do on a daily basis. But what's really interesting about this is that most people in investment strategies as investors start off usually with like a triplex or a fourplex, and then they move that to more multifamily and they grow it over time. And then sometimes, in most cases, you get to 300, 400 apartments and you're tired of fixing toilets. You're tired of the calls that come even from the management company that has authorized the repairs for all the things on Thanksgiving night at 11 o'clock, right? They want to move their equity from a product like that to something like this, where they're in charge of nothing. So they're no longer fixing, managing any of that property. Now they've got something where they can take their money and put it to work here and have no responsibility and create more of a passive income for themselves and not so operational. And, you know, for people that have been in the investment business of multifamily over time, unless they have their own management company, you're still managing and preparing that. And sometimes the revenue can be a bit higher, right? You might be able to make a little bit more money, but there's a management side to that, and that has cost to it as well. So the graduation and escalation of investment for most people that have a plan right? Some sort of exit plan with their equity is to grow over time. So it's really to grow your fourplex to your bigger apartment. Maybe it's even to what we call syndication, where they raise money and purchase real estate, right? Whatever it may be, people usually end up somewhere with a product like this in a shopping center that, it's like scroll through here, that
Well,
looks
this
like
is
this.
really helpful because I've been familiar with multifamily investors for a long time, but I just became part of a syndication in Texas. And I know that sometimes people want to maybe get out of that and move into something else. And this is like a great thing for me to know about, like kind of another exit strategy where they can go from taking their money from that, if they don't want to do that anymore, into something like this. It sounds like that's what happens sometimes.
It does. And in fact, in this particular case, the investor really wanted their own car wash, which is, they were looking for something where they could manage their own car wash. But what they realized was this was a much better deal for them to come in, spend their money, have somebody else do the car wash, and just collect a check and pay their financing. Now, in some cases, you know, in some cases, like I said, they go to the second generation tenant, right? The next car wash to come along. I always think it's interesting investments, and I always have my 10 cents of opinion, is that, you know, car wash these days with water, you know, Long Beach is having, I think, starting on the 6th or whenever, that we'll have to not use outdoor watering for 14 days, right? When the drought. But as I understand it, these car washes reutilize water, and you end up going to places like this, and, you know, rather than washing your own car at home or one of those spray booths, it ends up being actually a good call for water conservation as far as cars.
It is. I've heard that a lot. It definitely is.
Yeah. So I'm gonna share a screen here on. See if I can make this work. Chat, share. No. There is. No, we'll just keep it on there. So what are some of the drawbacks on a triple net lease or a single tenant net lease like this? Obviously you're not in charge. So you're signing a lease and you're hoping that this car wash survives. You're hoping that they're in there. You're not involved with any of the maintenance or the repairs or the land, you know, for the length of the lease. Although it's your land. So you have to keep track of what's going on there, but it would be terrible if the car wash didn't work out. That's the risk, right? You know, is this going to work here? The sprout's going to stay, right? Will the car wash be able to pay their lease? They're going to go here based upon the other people that are coming. They think there's going to be a tremendous amount of traffic here that will drive people to the car wash. Sprouts is a huge anchor, right? A place that's going to be there the same 20 years as you're going to be there. And there are going to be a lot of people shopping. So when you purchase something like this, all those things that play into your investment strategy still come into play, because you got to make sure that the tenant you pick, just like if you owned a single family home and rented it out, you got to make sure this person going to pay their bills. So you got to make sure that you're okay with it, because when you purchase this land, this lease has already been, it's already determined. They're the ones that have signed the lease and paid the deposit. You can't change your mind and repurpose this for something else. It's zoned for a car wash. And that's what's
If these
going in
people
there.
happen to go in default on their bills, does that fall on to you, like the landowner?
No, separate.
Okay,
They're just a tenant
okay,
leasing. In fact, when you sign a lease, there's language in the lease that puts the financing in place and, you know, subordination sequence. So, you're protected by the lease itself. Well, you should be if someone writes a good lease. Now, someone writes a bad lease. So what I was saying was, in this particular case, this is interesting because this is a $3.5 million purchase on the land. This is interesting because it pays out pretty well. The performance isn't too bad over time, and it's not that expensive to get in. In most cases, these centers are purchased in their entirety. So, whatever the total amount is, 40 some odd million for the entire shopping center, the average person can't get into that. But $3 million, a good realtor might be able to put together some friends and come up with enough money to make this thing cash flow, right? With the kind of commissions that we all earn. $3 million is not too far off of what it would cost to get into a large apartment building. That's why I think this is such a good opportunity. But it's such a passive income. It's kind of like with the everyone's familiar with the DSTs and King's Barn and all the guys selling their passive syndicated investment products. This is kind of like that, except you get to pick the real estate, right? I mean, you get to pick the real estate here. On the DSTs, you get to do that as well. But this has a little bit more, this is yours. You're not sharing it with anybody, unless you've got a partnership, obviously. But people really prefer the single tenant net leases, the triple net stuff, because they don't want to be in charge of people and tenants and people where they live. After a period of time, they get tired of that, and the returns are really good right now. Don't get me wrong, for multifamily, but in your exit strategy, when your depreciation is about finished and you need to trade your multifamily into something better, maybe your exit strategy isn't to give it to your children. Maybe you have an idea of growing this one more time before you pass it on in kind of a strategic wealth for your family, when you're gone. So there's a lot of reasons that people would get into this. Obviously, at the end of your depreciation cycle is a huge reason some of these go off, because I got $3 million left to spend, and if I don't spend all of the money in my sale of my property, I have to pay taxes on that money, and I'm not wanting to do that. So I'm going to buy the car wash and see how that goes and save myself, a couple $100,000 in taxes. So there's a lot of reason to get involved in them. Obviously there's a lot of nuances to these leases, as you can probably tell. There's a lot of diagnostic information about areas and where you should buy and where investors see opportunity. And that's always part of this particular program as well, is that we're always trying to point out places where there might be investment opportunity for people. So if you see, for example, if you see someone selling a triplex or an apartment building, and maybe you can get a hold of the owner, what are they doing with their money? What are you going to do? Where are you going to be trading? Are you going to be investing in something else? Are you just going to pay the taxes? Well, in the world of commercial, we come across opportunities like this all the time. And there may be someone who's maybe trading a $10 million multifamily and is short by $3 million in their trade, which means that they got $3 million to spend and they're looking for something really fast. Well, this would be an opportunity they could purchase. And it's available to them right now. In fact, there's a couple of these that are still available. The Taco Bell, I believe, is, and so is the Chick-fil-A. So those are opportunities and why investors like the triple net. And I think a lot of people get confused. That's why I want to talk about it today, because people are saying, what does NNN stand for, like an acronym? And it just means no, I'm not paying for it. You are. The tenant is, right? It's a triple net. So it's everything except for the mortgage or the financing that the landlord pulls on. Now, interesting enough, as we're talking about triple net leases, single tenant net leases in shopping centers, a lot of times, there's even more compensation for you as an investor. In particular cases, they have revenue sharing. So they have what they call revenue sharing, and that's part of some leases, if not 90% of what we see across our desk. So what does revenue sharing mean? Usually they take the amount of rent that you're paying and you annualize that. So how much you're paying in a year on rent. And if your sales revenue exceed the rent amount for the year that you're paying, the landlord wants a chunk of your profit, or I'm so sorry, of your sales. And in some cases it's 6%, 4%, and they write that in there. So as a tenant, when you read those things, it's a bit scary, because I owe rent, then I pay all the taxes, then I pay all the utilities, I pay all the assessments if something comes down. And in the event that I do really, really well, the landlord's going to want 6%, 5% of my gross sales paid to them. Now, it's not that much, because it's anything over what they call the break-even point. So if your rent is worth $10 a year and I make $11 that year in sales, then they want 6% of the $1, right? They get 6 cents. So they're not getting 6% of the whole amount, just over your break-even point. But it's another way that the tenant gets to generate income. Again, the hardest part of acquiring it and the level of entry to get in is how expensive these places are. That's why, like, this car wash deal seems like a good deal. Now, in their lease, there's no break-even profit or sales sharing for the landlord. However, in some cases, in strip malls and things like that, you will see that kind of language, and you'll see that kind of structure in a lease. So not all leases. So that's kind of I don't want to fix toilets anymore, and I got to trade my building, so I'm going to buy a car wash, right? I'm going to lease them the land, and they're going to do their car wash. That's why you do it. So you have more passive income. You're not managing it. You got more equity than you want to, and you don't want to do multi-family tenant leasing, and you're graduating to the next tier in investment and income and equity growth over time. Now, most important to know is that once you sign a lease and get your tenant in there, and the occupancy happens, commencement of the lease happens, the most valuable part of your land is when the lease is new, right? Because if you were to take this to market, now that I got it built and I got a car wash in there, and in the first year I've got this lease, well, the lease is worth a lot of money in income, right? We looked at this. Where is it here? On the page, where is it? Don't get too sick, I'm going too fast. Where is it? Right here. Look at all that income for all those years, right? That's got a value to it. So now someone would come in to your lease opportunity here, and you may even be able to sell it for more than you paid for it, because now you've got a lease that's 20 years, and they'll be paying you for 20 years. It's got more value to it. Now it's built, the tenant's in there. Maybe you can make $1 million just by doing this. A lot of people do that, right? A lot of people come in and restructure. Starbucks does that a lot. We've yet to do a deal with Starbucks, but I can tell you that a lot of times what they'll do is they'll come in and they'll have the landlord actually build, but sometimes they'll build on a lot. The landlord will make all that work and then turn right around and say, I've got Starbucks in for a 20-year lease. And what was a $2 million piece of property on it's worth 12 million, 15 million, depending. So that's one exit strategy as well that some people take care of and use in their financial planning or investment strategies. Does anyone have any questions about this right now?
I'm not sure if you saw, you may have already addressed it. There was a question in the chat.
Yeah.
And also I have a question. everything that you've explained so far, are there any nuances that are different with this this type of retail property that might be different in like a little mini mall situation as opposed to something large like this?
Well, this is an interesting piece because this is a ground lease, right? I mean, we basically, you haven't built the property, right? So they're spending all the money to build. In a strip mall, it's already built. So now I've just got space to rent.
I see.
So it can be a little bit different, and you're sharing all the expenses with all the clients, the tenants in there. So if you've got 10 tenants in there and the expenses are X number of dollars, whatever percentage of square feet that you occupy is the percentage of the expenses you pay in your triple net. So, right, if you occupy 25% of the gross rentable area or usable area, then you pay 25% of the common area expenses, property taxes, the maintenance and so forth. Sometimes utilities, if there's a general utility fund, that kind of thing. So
Okay.
the single tenant net lease is, even we say they're interchangeable. The big difference is this is one person on the land versus a triple net lease with 12 people and 12 tenants. So it's a little bit different, but interchangeable because they're paying all the expenses. It's just one person.
Okay, got it.
Sure. So there was an opportunity, bring this up because the opportunities are everywhere and you have to look into them, or, if you think there's just an opportunity, we're always looking to tell people in this business that are even not in commercial, like if you see something and you got questions about it, give us a call. Let's talk about it, because you never know what's going on. You just never know. You look at something or you see for sale and you're just kind of curious, as commercial, what's going on there. The eyes and ears, what we call the passive recon that we have with people that come to talk to us about what's going on, have so much potential for income. It's incredible. Now, I came across an opportunity the way that I'm telling you about looking at things and asking questions during COVID. And this is a single tenant net lease deal I want to tell you about because I came about it naturally, and I couldn't put the deal together myself because I really liked the deal, but I couldn't afford to do it at the time. So it was a restaurant in a neighborhood in Long Beach in the Belmont Heights area. And the business was sold to the restaurant. The business opportunity was sold to the restaurant a couple years back, but the owner of the landlord still owned the building. Well, it was COVID and the restaurant was shut down and it wasn't doing a lot of business. It was doing some business outside. However, the business was there to stay, and they had a long lease, and they just signed a new lease for 15 years. And the owner wanted to get out underneath her building and sell it. Now, there was an opportunity there because she only wanted to sell it for $800,000. And the business itself was thriving before COVID, and coming out of COVID, it's doing fantastic. But they only wanted $800,000 for the deal. And there was a single tenant net lease in place. And that tenant paid for everything. And all you had to do was come up with the financing. The financing was $300,000 down. And with the rent that they were paying on the discount of COVID was enough to pay the rent. To pay the mortgage plus $1,000 a month. When they went back to normal lease rates with financing in place with $300,000 down, you're just financing $400,000. Their net profit for the landlord was $5,000 a month in the first year of their lease. And there were 7% increases for the next 15 years, every 2 years on that lease. It was an opportunity of a lifetime because the restaurant's there to stay. Well, the restaurant guy figured it out. He bought the building. And then the kicker was that it's zoned in a residential area. So ideally, you could put an apartment or a living, maybe 2 units above the restaurant if you wanted to. But it was an opportunity, and had I not asked about it and understood it, I would not have been able to figure out what's going on there. And those opportunities are everywhere. You know, I didn't get the deal, but somebody else did. But they're everywhere, and you just never know. If you drive by something and it raises a question in your mind about what's going on in this commercial space, give us a call. Let's talk about it. Maybe there's an opportunity there. Maybe we've got an investor that wants to purchase. Maybe they don't have anybody to sell it, right? Maybe they got a requirement to buy something else and they don't know who to go to. So be out there asking questions, and all we need is a location and a phone number, and you get paid.
Well,
It's great.
that was, there was a question I was going to ask, and it was funny because you started to answer it anyway. And so it's like, I was like, okay, I got that one. But how are we involved as the agent, since you're the one that specializes in commercial, and, you know, most of us are working residential. I mean, I'm just starting to get into some multi-family commercial, but I'm definitely learning from seasoned people because I don't know. But like, how are we involved as an agent? Because you said, you know, call you and everything. Like, is it like a co-listing thing, or how does it work?
Well, we have 3 different slots. So we've got a strategic partnership, which is something that's kind of flexible and kind of a meeting of the minds and doing business together. There's the team where you join the team and, you know, you come to work and that. And then there's a slot of referral. And that seems to be the most popular lately. Is you collect 25% of the gross commission, mind you, of any deal that we put together that you bring to us. Not minus expenses, but it's just 25% of the gross commission. So whatever expenses that we take on, you're not a part of that. You just get 25% of the gross. And in some cases, expenses can exceed what you would net out on a deal just for 25% and not doing a thing. Come onto
So
the
it
team.
sounds like-
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, it sounds like the referral route might be a really good place to start for some people.
It is. Opinions vary, but we offer flexibility, and we can discuss those at any time.
Okay.
Joseph had a question about when the property is sold to a new potential buyer for a higher price, who's responsible to cover the difference? The new buyer covers the difference in a supplemental tax bill, just like residential. And then Brandy had a question on lease templates. We utilize Airforms for our leases. Updated education on leases as well to write those. You know, lease templates are interesting. Leases are as unique as you and I. So if you've got a lease, I wouldn't recommend just doing it. I would definitely come and see a commercial expert, because they can be pretty intense, and what to look out for and how to negotiate a good lease takes some experience, and I wouldn't just do it solo. I think in your market centers probably want you working with somebody who knows what they're doing. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you put your yourself in danger of being sued, or not doing the right thing by your client.
I have a question, Jason, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Dawn. Thanks for the opportunity to speak this morning, or this afternoon. I got into the call a little bit late, so I may have missed your information. As far as a contact number, is there a contact number to touch bases with you in case we do come across opportunities that would love to, refer it over to you or partnered on a specific commercial
There you
deal?
go. Put in the chat. I'll put it in the chat.
Awesome. I think I saw it. I'm walking, so it's kind of bad. I got it. Thank you.
Sure. And, you know, I mean, one of the things too, if you're looking for referrals, leases are a good referral. Because in our business, leases are, they happen faster than transactions. A lot of our transactions have kind of a incubation period of like, you know, 9 months, some a year and a half. So leases happen fairly quickly, and for referrals and so forth, you can get paid sooner. And that's a plus. You know, when you look at a lease, for example, if you're trying to figure out how much money you can make, so that's usually what realtors do, right? Let's see, 25% of, and so you take the gross rent over the period of the lease. So, you know, last lease we did was worth $2.5 million, right? And we get paid a percentage based upon that. So they're sizable. You know, the 10 and 20-year leases are sizable. Office leases in general, you know, are usually longer. They're a little less popular these days, but we do them as far as people needing them. And but they're a great opportunity to get referrals. Or, you know, if you're walking into a business and said, you know, maybe a role play would be, you know, when's your lease renew? You know, are you working with someone? Get their card and we can give them a call and see if we can help them. Right? When does your lease renew? Who negotiates your lease? It's just a new question to ask, and you know, that kind of thing. So, anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. That's pretty much it I've got today on the triple net and the single tenant net leases. I think it's important for you to educate yourself for these things, because you never know when someone's talking about them, whether there's an opportunity to make money, to help a client, or to jump into commercial real estate. You know, if you're waiting for an opportunity and maybe there's an opportunity for a referral, we're happy to pay them and happy to be a part of it. And you know, we're happy to help you understand what it is that you're doing, and hopefully we can make some money together or help you make money.
Well, I
Thanks,
thank you,
Jason.
because it was really helpful in just figuring out, like, I'm sure a lot of people think, how do I get into commercial, especially what you're talking about with businesses? And you made it really easy. Like, there's just opportunities everywhere, like make a couple calls and all of a sudden you may find yourself in the middle of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is commercial real estate's interesting because it's like the metaphor I use, you know, the analogy is like the 405 freeway. You can choose to get on or you can get off at any time, but it's always happening. And there's a stimulus for commercial real estate is way beyond what residential is motivated by and stimulated by. Even in bad times, commercial is realigning itself either through financing or you know, trading properties or doing something. And it never finds a standstill too long. It'll you know, it'll die like anything else in a bad economy, but there's something happening. And there's I mean, if you look at it that way, every single four-way intersection that you come to, every person on those corners is either in a lease, purchased it recently, but they're all in business to make money. Every single corner you come to in commercial, and it's happening. You have no idea what's happening. So
I have a question. On those strip centers,
Yeah.
how do those usually get packaged? So who
packaged, what do you mean
determines,
by packaged?
like, who determines if it's Taco Bell versus Del Taco? The developer?
In this particular case, the developer utilized CBRE to go out and find those tenants.
And then what, who usually drafts the templates? Like, the developer could have their standard lease that they want to see in place, but then if, say, Taco Bell has their own commercial division that has their standard lease, how do you go about negotiating whose lease gets used?
Well, in this particular case, so like retail clients like this, there's relationships that have already been developed over time. So if I'm going out to get Taco Bell, I go get Taco Bell quite a bit, right? I mean, as far as a client, if I were that person. So I'm putting Taco Bells all over the nation. So I already know how it works with them, and I've already prepped my client for the expectation of having them in there, and it's negotiations. And basically, at the very end of the negotiations, the attorneys strike stuff out and put stuff in, depending on the state, depending on the property. So they're, like I said, they're just as unique as you and I. And you know, just like anybody else, it starts from two sides and they negotiate it together. I would say that the stronger the client, the more power the tenant has, right? Starbucks want to come in and take over 10,000 square feet of your property. You're probably going to listen to their terms.
Right. But what if you really like Dutch Bros better? Like, I'm just curious how that all works.
My dad says, then you have a conundrum.
All right, just curious how that all came about.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
I'll put the recording to this on YouTube, so anyone who wants to go back and listen again, and it will be there today.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Really helpful.
Thank you.